Hi everyone, my name's Anna Ross. I'm the team leader for A-Level Psychology at Long Road. Welcome to our alternative open evening. Our goal today is to help you understand a bit more about A-Level Psychology so that you can make a really well-informed decision. So most people have a good understanding of what psychology basically is. We're interested in studying human behaviour to understand what drives us, the things that make us similar and the things that make us different. And the main aim of that is to try and improve people's lives, either by making sure development happens in the best way possible, or putting right things when they go wrong and supporting people with things like their mental health. But if I were to ask you, what would you be doing in a classroom as a student studying psychology? That's where people tend to be a bit less clear. But that's what you're looking to maybe sign up for. So it's really important that you've got a good idea of what you would really be doing over the next couple of years. So what do we look at on A-Level Psychology? We follow the AQA specification, and these are the kinds of questions that the course content addresses. So have a little look through, maybe pause me if you need to, and just think about whether these sound like things you're interested in learning about, because that's obviously the first important step. But how do we go about learning about these things? Well, all psychological research is theory. And theory means developing ideas and explanations for things through systematic research, piecing it together, building evidence, and ultimately coming to a shared understanding of something that's fairly well accepted as being correct. So an enormous amount of what you learn about in psychology is how those theories that have become established have been developed. And that means understanding the approaches that they take and the research methods that they use. So when we talk about approaches in psychology, we refer to different ways of coming at explaining human behaviour. So a couple of examples. The most familiar one for you at the moment would probably be the biological approach. We try to map behaviours onto our biological functioning. So looking at things like how our brain functions and how thought happens, what happens in response to different events inside our brain, or looking at the impact of our hormones on our behaviour. But then the complete opposite of that would be to look at our learning and the impact of our experience on our lives and how that works to mould us and change the way we respond to things. So there's quite a lot of different approaches. These are the sort of main 5 in psychology. At the moment, the movement in research is probably primarily a move to combine the biological and the cognitive approaches. So cognitive psychology is about theorizing about our thought processing, so almost treating us a bit like computers, where we take in sensory information and effectively we spit out different behaviors at the other end. So something different is going on in the middle in terms of our processing, and we're trying to understand how that works. So that's very theoretical and abstract theory. So trying to combine that with the physical manifestation of thought and processing within the brain is a big growth area at the moment. And that's really led by the advances in technology over the last 30 years. So different approaches. Some of the topics that you'll look at in the course will actually look at from multiple points of view. And so a big part of your skill will be learning to put those different ideas against one another and discuss their relative merits. However, I mentioned research. Psychology comes with a big chunk of science. The big 3, if you like, the main 3 approaches that are the first 3 on that list on the previous slide, very much, despite their distinctions, have one thing in common, and that is the use of the scientific method. So when we try to apply science to human study, it's actually really very complicated. We know when we're being watched. We change our behavior in response to that kind of knowledge. We have rights. We need to be treated fairly. You can't just do whatever you like to human participants. And there's lots of different ways in which you might measure people's responses. You can look at their biology, but you might also need to watch their behavior. And watching and making judgments carries with it quite a lot of risk of bias and error. So the research that builds our theories, effectively, it is their foundation, has to be high quality scientific research to have real merits and to be rigorous. And so a really big part of your skill set is to be able to pull apart that research and its methodology to be able to then critically evaluate the theories that they support. So this is something you may not be expecting about A-level psychology, that there's actually an extremely scientific focus. So while you may not completely love all of your sciences that you've done at school, there is obviously a reasonable chunk of biology within psychology. It's more about thinking about whether you are happy to be working in that scientific way, thinking about things in with that hat on, if you like, being concerned with the rigorous objective nature of the research and how well it stands up. So what will you actually study? How will you go about A-level psychology? So it's 100% exam assessment. You'll have 3 2-hour exams at the end of 2 years. And you can see, hopefully, if you reflect on some of the questions on that earlier slide, you can see that they're reflecting these topics that are spread throughout the course. So any A-level course is going to try and give you a good basic grounding in all the main areas of the subject, if you like. And you can see there that approaches in psychology is an ever-present element of that, because all of those topics are using different approaches. So that's a synoptic element of the course. And you can also see research methods there in bold, right in the middle, because actually that is worth more marks, twice as many marks than any other topic on the course. So you can hopefully see from that it's a really big, important component of what we do, and it's something to be prepared for. Research methods may not be the most fascinating thing in the world to many students. It's really the topics that you want to study, but it's a means to an end. It is the thing that allows you to really get under the skin of those topics and the theory and become really skilled in the field of psychology. So the questions that you deal with in your exams are everything from multiple choice up to essay length questions. And it's also important to bear in mind that in addition to this very scientific focus, that also means looking at research and even designing research yourself. And that means a certain amount of maths, because you're going to be dealing with data, okay? An understanding of how we analyze data, how we make judgments about it, what kind of calculations need to be done, and how we use probability to make judgments to avoid researcher bias and error. So it's more about use of maths than being able to do really complicated mathematics yourself. So why study psychology? One would hope that there's a certain element of interest for you, but equally, in thinking about narrowing down your subject range, one of the considerations should be what kind of skills do these subjects continue to develop for you? And psychology is a really hybrid subject between really complex writing skills, discussion, analysis, and dealing with science and data, and being able to make judgments, critically analyze, apply your ideas, taking theory and applying it to novel situations. So actually there's a really broad range of skills that the subject develops in you. And therefore you become a really versatile student. So it sits very well alongside an enormous range of other subjects. There's almost nothing, there is nothing I would say don't combine it with. If you're doing a very humanities focused program and psychology is in that set, then it gives you that more science and maths edge to your studies and keeps showing that you can do those sorts of things. If, on the other hand, you're doing a very science-based set of subjects, we're really going to push your writing skills more than they are and develop much more complex discussion. So it really combines brilliantly with lots of other subjects. And it's going to make you a really appealing student for your next applications onwards. So what do people go on to do when they do A-level psychology? Well, really an enormous range of things, again, because of that versatility that it builds in you. Last year, 32 of our students went on to do specific psychology-related degrees, but equally, similar number of them went on to do criminology or sociology. And those are the sort of dominant subjects that our students do, but equally, they may be following some of their other A-level subjects, and psychology helps them get there as well. So there's a huge range of different subjects that people go on to study with this course under their belt. It's worth noting that not everybody who does psychology A-level does a degree in it. You don't have to want to do a degree in psychology or be a psychologist to study it at this point. Even if you do a degree in psychology, only about 25% of graduates actually go on to do further postgraduate qualifications and go on to work specifically in the field of psychology. And it's worth being aware that if that is your aspiration, there is quite a bit of graduate and postgraduate study that's required to get there. And it's quite competitive. So I'm sure you're thinking, I've never done this subject before. That's a bit scary to try and take on at A-level. Well, about 98% of our students have no direct formal experience of psychology when they come to us. That's pretty normal. So we're used to looking after people in those circumstances. It does mean that you'll have a fairly steep learning curve while you're with us. And that's okay. I would just consider avoiding having all of your subjects being brand new subjects, because that's going to be a lot to contend with. So how do we manage getting you through a challenging A-level? We will use regular assessment throughout the course, and that allows us to help you build your self-discipline, your revision skills, your study skills, and those exam skills to be able to handle the complex questions that you get. They also allow us to identify those of you who are struggling and need a bit of support. And there's a lot available at the college. So you'll have regular one-to-one reviews with your teachers. And there's what we call subject plus time in every subject. So you can get extra sessions, and we have a range of sessions available depending on what people need to develop. So if you're a middle grade student who wants to aspire to the high grades, but you're struggling to get there on your own, we provide coaching for that kind of need. And equally, we provide coaching for those of you who struggle with things like the essay skills or handling data, some of the tougher areas that for some people on the course. And if people really need some really focused support, that is available as well in the form of small group tutorials where I work with 3 or 4 students at a time, and then I can really focus in on their needs. So what else do we do in the department? It's not all work. We do a range of trips throughout the year. Some are more light-hearted than others. We do some linking with universities, and we have speakers coming into the college as well. We have people who come in from industry who are working in roles that involve psychology qualifications, and they talk about things that we study on our course and how they use those in their everyday work. And then we have one really big trip in the year where we go to Poland and we go to visit the Auschwitz and Birkenau death camps, which links to obedience to authority within our social influence topic. Some of the research in that was inspired by World War II and the Holocaust. So there's lots of things at varying levels of sort of scale that you can get involved in through the department. Excuse me. So what do you need to be able to get onto A-level psychology? Now, it's quite a tough course in the range of subjects that are available at A-level. So in addition to the 7 grade 4s that qualify you as a base level for A-levels, we want you to have slightly higher grades in English, maths and science. And on the rare occasions where people have done psychology before, we'd like a grade 5 in that as well. And this really is just reflective of the additional challenges that exist on the course and what we know about who tends to succeed on the course and find it manageable and who really tends to struggle. So we don't want to set you up on a course where you're going to spend 2 years just struggling. So that's why we want slightly higher grades in those key subjects. Now, if you're really keen on psychology, but your predicted grades aren't looking quite that optimistic, have a look at our alternative psychology course, Applied Psychology. That has it's the same level and it has similar content, but it has a slightly different focus in its way of working, hence its title being applied. And it also has a very different assessment structure, which makes it more accessible to more students. So it's a really good option if A-level psychology is a little bit out of reach. So finally, what else can I do if I'm interested in psychology and I want to try and keep researching and learn more about it? The most obvious thing is talk to people who've studied it, and don't just ask about what topics we study, ask them about what they liked about it, and most importantly, what they found challenging, what they didn't like so much, because that will be really informative about where the areas might be that you might not like so much too. There's lots and lots of media out there that can give you a better understanding of what psychology involves as well. So the British Psychological Society runs psychology in the UK, and they have some fantastic podcasts that they link out to that are all psychology related, and book recommendations from famous psychologists that they interview. I'd also recommend Goodreads as a way of finding related books. And there's lots of documentaries free to view on things like the BBC and Channel 4. They put out some really high quality content. To a slightly lesser extent, I would recommend watching psychology related movies. You can find lists where students have voted for the best psychology related films, and there are some really brilliant movies out there. Just bear in mind that there may be a certain amount of artistic license taken in places. Some films are more accurate in their depiction of things than others. And bear in mind that when you're watching documentaries and movies, and even when you're reading books and things, you are really looking at applied psychology, which is the sort of end point where people have done all their theory and their qualifications and know the underlying research. And then they're using psychology in a context like crime solving or clinical treatment. So bear in mind that while that is the end goal and for some of you and very interesting, it's not directly reflective of studying. Okay, so all that remains to be said is very best of luck with your choices. Try not to fret too much about this process. It is scary, making decisions and narrowing your field of study down. My best advice would be to follow your instincts and remember that nothing is set in stone until you actually start your courses. So the best way to get over that fear of making decisions is to focus on what you definitely don't want to do. So work out all of those things and discount them. And then that will leave you with a narrower range of things to try and focus on. and do your research, particularly on subjects like mine, where you haven't studied it before. Okay, so I hope we've been able to answer all of the questions that you would have in your mind at this point. If you need anything else, you are very welcome to contact us at the college, and otherwise, very best of luck, and we hope to see you sometime in the future.